Alright, hello again everybody. This is Mr. Everything, and I am coming back at you with another wargaming and miniature video. In this video, we're going to continue on with our epic Waterloo project update. In my last update, I stated that there wasn't going to be any updates for a while because I'm waiting for miniatures to come in so that I can compare them. Well, idle hands, you know the saying. So I've spent the last couple of days working on maps, and you can see one on the screen right here. This is a Google map of Waterloo. I went through the map in detail. I mean, I can even go down here and where is it at? We go satellite with labels. Okay, great. Right, and you can see like that is La Haye Saint is right there. And then there's the mound, the Butte of the Lion. But here's Hougoumont right there. And then you got La Belle Alliance right there, and Mont Saint Jean over here, and then you have the Papillote over here, and then scroll down even further, you've got Plans Noir right down here. But yeah, this is modern. This is not the exact same map that you would see, or it wouldn't be, it's not exactly the same as it was in 1815, but the roads pretty much haven't changed. The locations of some of these areas, like La Belle Alliance, La Haye Saint, Hougoumont. Now, as an example, I can zoom in on Hougoumont, and Google Maps is pretty good for this. It gives you the there's a couple cars, but no, it gives you the layout of the main buildings. There were buildings back here. They are no longer. I believe they burned down. You got the chapel right there, or maybe that's the chapel. That's a manor house. But you've got the gardens, the walled gardens, and that was torn down and then rebuilt, is my understanding. They even did a Waterloo project where they went through this killing area and they dug it all up, trying to uncover clues to, like, relics and stuff like that. But that's not the point. The point I'm trying to make here is I've got a measuring tool here on Google Maps, right? And I used it to determine like how many meters it was. Okay, let me grab that and shrink it down. Boom. That's a 200 meter line right there, right? Okay. Well, I used this information. I went through the entire map. I tried to superimpose a 5-foot by 9-foot table on top of the map, and then I made 1-foot squares, and then I tried to determine how big those squares were if I was to do Waterloo in a, there we go. If I was able to do Waterloo, I'm using a period map where it has like La Haye Saint, Hougoumont, it has La Belle Alliance, it has Mont Saint Jean, it has all those things, and I did some and there's Plans Noir down there. I did some measurements between the different buildings, down the roads, and basically I tried, like this intersection. Okay, I don't know if you can see it, but like this intersection right there, that's still on the map. We'll call this intersection 1. This is the Wellington tree, right? So we'll call that intersection 2. Um, and then And you see how these roads kind of, well, no, here, let's look at this one. You see how this road north of Hougoumont comes to La Belle Alliance, and then it shoots up to Papelotte. We'll call that, that intersection, we'll call that 3, right? Okay. So, okay, so this road here, right? This is the road on the Waterloo map. That's the line that Wellington defended, right? Okay, good. Clear the measurements. Got it. You see that road north of Hougoumont? That goes down to La Belle Alliance, and then there's another road right there that goes up to the Papelotte. See, those roads are still there. Even today, 200 years later, they're still there. This road here is the defensive line where there's the Butte, the Lion, and this is the Wellington tree would be right in here. And then this is the Waterloo Museum, which I don't know if you know this, but I actually visited this Waterloo Museum. I have a ton of photographs. I bought a bunch of paintings there. And I also bought brochures and stuff like that. I was a kid in a candy store, you know. And then I took there's stairs that go all the way to the top of this thing. There's a specific number of stairs, 222 steps or something like that, or it might be more. I don't remember what the number was. But I remember that it was a big climb. It was a big climb to get up there. Now we weren't able to visit La Haye Sainte for some reason. I think it was walled off or blockaded for renovations or something like that. Unfortunately, I was unable to go play around in there. But when you go into the panorama view, you actually, when you're standing in the middle of the room, there are, depending on which way you face, you will see the units that you normally would have seen. So like it'll show you like if I was in the building looking south, I would see the fields and the French all the way across the field. And if I turn to my left, I'm going to see all the British lined up against this road here. I thought that was pretty cool. But we were able to actually, me and my wife, that is, we actually were able to go to the Hougoumont. I took a bunch of pictures there. We stood in front of this building right here in this little grassy area. We stood there and I looked at this wall and it had a bunch of these little bullet holes in it. Musket balls, holes in the wall at the time. Now remember, I had visited this place in the early 90s, like 91, 92, something like that. So, yeah, that's when I was there. And then we walked in the gardens. I stepped out in the gardens and I was like, there's nothing here really to see. And then I just came back. But I do remember these 3 trees. There was only 3 trees, if I remember right. Yeah, there was 1, 2, 3. I don't remember this tree here, but I think I remember there was only 3 trees. And they said that there was hundreds of trees down in this section right here, which was like a forested area, you know. I thought that was pretty cool. And then this is like their gardens, and this was, I don't know, remember all that stuff. But either way, what I'm trying to get at is, and this is making a super short story super long, but I took measurements, right, using the Google Maps, using the measuring tool. I measured from point A to point B or point C to point A or whatever, and I tried to determine exactly how many feet I wanted to be. I thought about it in my head. I said, how big what kind of measurement on the table do I want 1 inch to be? Like, I understand we're gonna be playing an epic scale, so I was thinking that maybe 1 inch could be 100 yards. You know, I kind of got that idea from ESR. I was like, okay, I could do a 1 to 100 scale. But then I thought, I created the grid. You can see the squares on my map. I created a grid at 1 to 100, and it was way too small. The so I tried 2 inches. I said, okay, 2 inches, or 1 inch could be 50 yards, something like that. And then it was wound up being way too big, right? So I settled on a measurement. Okay, let me see if I can get my mouse pointer in the right spot. Right, I settled on a measurement of 1.5 inches being 100 yards. Okay, and this grid, these are 1 foot squares on the table, but the measurement winds up being 800 yards, right? And those yards equate to real life measurements. So I took real measurements from Google Maps, did some math, figured out how many inches it would take to do, or how many yards it would take to do 12 inches. And if I used a square this big, because I wanted to use my entire map, right? I mean, I could have made these squares bigger or smaller and then just said that they were bigger or smaller in measurement. So that would have worked fine. But I want it to kind of jive with the epic scale or N scale miniature scale, as well as the base scale, right? So a 30 millimeter base, which is going to equate to a few ranks. I don't know how many ranks a company or 2 companies would be, but approximately 150 men in a 30 by 20 base. Okay, so I looked at these bases. Let's go ahead and use a backwards arrow, get rid of some of these circles. Okay, so I looked down at the way the artist drew where the units were deployed. This is not necessarily 100% accurate. It is an artist's interpretation of a military historian, someone in the battle, decided that this is probably where all the units were. But okay, so let's take a look at like Waterloo or Foy's brigade, and those are about, I don't know, 8 inches, would you say? If that was a 12-inch square, would you say Foy was occupying about 8 to 10 inches? I would say yes. And then I would say, really, it's only 5 battalions across in that 8 inches. Okay, so again, if I was to say, how many millimeters is 8 inches, right? So, okay, what am I doing? I'm thinking it's pretty close to 20 millimeters, right? I mean, pretty close. if 30 is pretty close to a foot, which it's not exactly, but it's almost 35. But let's just say 20. Well, if it's closer to 10, maybe it's 25. So we'll just say somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 25 millimeters for Foy's brigade, right? 20 to 25 millimeters. Okay. If you divide, and there's only 5 battalions in the front rank. So, okay, let me see if I can get a calculator. I can, look at that, a calculator. Okay, so we take the 25 millimeters, right? And this should be pretty easy math. Now that I divide by 5, it's going to be 5. Right, so each battalion should be about 5 millimeters. Well, or centimeters. Right, centimeters, not millimeters, sorry. So I'm breaking it down even further and just saying that's perfect because, I mean, I could still fudge it a little bit this way or that. I don't think I'm going to. I'm going to leave it the way it is. I don't mind my units occupying just a little bit extra space. But if a base is 30 millimeters across, 2 of them would be 60 or 6 centimeters, which is just a little bit bigger than 5. And that's okay because, again, this is just an artist's interpretation. And who knows if he didn't mean to draw them in March column. You know, in that case, they would be 30 millimeters, which would only be 15. But they would be a lot deeper. Based on just looking at the drawing, I think that's 2 bases in the front and 2 bases in the back. So a 40 by 60 is what I think each of these battalions are occupying. And so I think it works out perfect, right? Okay. What that also winds up being is if I'm doing 1.5 inches is 100 meters, that pretty much comes out to 1 foot on the table is an 800 meter foot, right? So you got 800 meters from, 800 meters along a side of one of these squares. Okay. So that effectively makes the entire battlefield 4 kilometers, right? From there to there, because 4,000 yards, 4,000 meters. I'm calling them yard meters because I'm not going exact. And then the other way is considered 7.2 kilometers. Okay, and so this battlefield that I've got drawn right here as a 5x9 would be basically 4x7, right? It's 7,200 yards, but I'm just going to call it 4 kilometers by 7 kilometers. That's a pretty good size battlefield scale for a 5x9 table. So that's what I'm going with. Okay, so far so good, right? Okay. Now, yeah, because I'm basing it on 5 feet being 60 inches and 9 feet being 108 inches, but that's basically just 9 times 12. You get it? Okay, so also, remember, this is a Napoleonic epic update, so I'm basically telling you or sharing with you my work in progress. I've stopped painting all Napoleonic models. Complete hard stop. Boom. I have some 15 millimeter models. I'm not going to be doing Waterloo in 15 millimeter. I've decided I'm going smaller. We're going to go with the epic scale. It might or might not wind up being Warlord Epic or 10 millimeter. Today's announcement from Warlord about their release schedule, you should check that out on a previous video I did this afternoon, is making it hard on me to decide if I want to go with the epic plastics or 10 millimeter metals. So I'm kind of in a limbo area right now, but like I said, I'm not going to make a decision on that until I actually get the epic models in and get the 10 millimeter models in, and then I would be able to compare them and make an educated decision at that time. But right now I'm kind of basing everything on a 20 by 30 base and 4 bases being a battalion. So that's infantry. So I broke that out into cavalry, right? If each one of these would be considered a unit, it is slightly larger than these. All these cavalry units are slightly larger. I was thinking still using 4 bases because I want all standards to be pretty much 4, except for maybe that guy. It's pretty large, right? But 4 bases. But if I go 20 by 30, they're going to be exactly the same as a infantry battalion. So and plus. Okay, so here's my thought process again. I'm still going in with my thought processes. The cavalry based in the epic pictures, the pictures that I've seen of the epic. Whenever I say epic, I'm talking about Warlord Epic, not the 10 millimeter epic. Warlord Epic has 5 horses, which is exactly 1/2 the men, right? So there's 10 men on a base or 5 horses on a base. Yes, they're putting them on 60 millimeter bases. That's okay. My breakdown is they take up twice as much space. So 1 horse will occupy the space of 2 men. That's what I'm thinking. If I am putting 5 men on a base, then a horse, I would only be able to get 2 horses on there, right? Because that'd be 4 men. But if I go with a 3rd horse, then I would need to take that 30 millimeter base and maybe make it 40 millimeters. And I think that's what I'm going to do. That's just pre-planning. I'm kind of hypothetically thinking I'm going to go 20 by 40 for my cavalry. And I'm going to put 3 horses on a base. And it's going to look a lot like my 28 millimeter cavalry, right? Because I put 3 horses on a base and 4 bases to move them around. So it's still going to be 12 horse models. They're just not going to be 3, 5. I'm not going to use 3 bases. I'm going to use 4 smaller bases with 3 models. That's what I think I'm going to do. That will allow me to put double rank lines. It'll allow me to do single rank lines. It'll allow me to do march columns, because that's all you need to do with cavalry. There's no squares. Okay, no attack columns, but they do have 2 rank lines. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do, and I think it would look like the proper size of these battalions that are on the map. Okay, so far so good, right? Okay, so that's that. Now this is where I struggle. We're playing Black Powder. Black Powder is a battalion scale game, meaning the maneuver element that you're maneuvering around as a clump of bases is a battalion, right? Most town sectors in black powder are supposed to be able to only hold one battalion and a gun. I think that's correct. I don't remember. Maybe I'm getting Napoleon's battles mixed up. I might have to go back to my black powder rules and double check that, but I think it's one battalion and a gun. Okay. So town sectors are not supposed to be individual buildings, right? They're supposed to be like 4 or 5 buildings in a cluster, and they're represented on the table with one building, right? This one model of a building is supposed to represent a cluster of actual buildings. And that's good because in black powder 28s, you're only putting 24 men, right? 24 actual figures in that building, where in reality, you're looking at like 600 men occupying a cluster of buildings. Okay, so how do I normally represent that on my black powder battlefields? What I do is I mark out a area on the battlefield. Either I will have a base that I put down on the table that has a definitive outline around the base that tells you that is the town sector. And then what I'll do is I'll put a building on that base, and you would say, okay, that is a town sector, right? And then when you move up to the building and you occupy the building, you put your figures in that town sector. You can adjust where that building is inside the town sector to make everything fit. If you have to, even if you have to, you could take that building and move it a little bit off to the side, and this is what I used to do with my Napoleon's battles. I would have a piece of felt on the table that indicated where that town sector was, and then I would put a building on top of it. And then when you moved into the town sector, you just moved that building out of the way and put your figures inside that town sector, because they do it very similarly. And then I would just set the building off to the side. And then when they leave, you just put the building back on the town sector. I don't think I want to do it that way this time. What I think I want to do is make little vignettes with, or like a farmhouse and a garden or a hotel or a city with multiple buildings or whatever. But I want to make a base, but I want to have the base be able to fit 4 stands of infantry. I could care less about cavalry because cavalry doesn't go in town sectors. So 4 infantry stands, and they can be all facing in every different direction. It doesn't matter because they're no longer a formed unit at that point. They're kind of deployed in the town. So I could put a fence around it. I could put a wall around it. I could put the building in it. I could even take the building and put it up in a corner somewhere, and then leave the other 3/4 of the base open, as part of the garden or as part of the driveway, or where the farmland or whatever. And that way I can put those figures in there, and they would obviously be deployed inside that town sector. And I wouldn't have to move the buildings around or off the table or shuffle them, because then it starts to look like the buildings have feet and they're moving around the table, and you don't want that. Same thing with trees. Usually I don't like trees getting up and walking away either. But that's a different story. Which, if you go back and watch a few of my previous videos, I did some N-scale trees, and I've got a bunch more coming in tomorrow. Different brand. Plus, I got some new flock coming in tomorrow, so I might have to do an update on my terrain texturing video. I'm probably not going to do it tomorrow, but I'm getting it all in tomorrow. Okay, so that's what I want to do. I want to make a base, or at least have a definitive size for a town sector that figures can go inside of, and then it would be settled, right? The Hougoumont and the La Haye Saint models that Warlord is releasing are 15 millimeter. And they're true scale 15 millimeter, which means 15 millimeters on the ground represents 6 feet. The problem with that is the Warlord, I do believe their Hougoumont building is somewhere around 2 feet long. Okay, so if this board is only 1 foot, that Hougoumont building would be this big. That is way too big on the table in 15 millimeter. Okay, so I've been looking at 10 millimeter buildings, right? The 10 millimeter Hougoumont, got 10 millimeter Hougoumont is 17 inches, right? So you're still looking at about that big, right? That is way too big. It's accurate to the foot, to the ground scale, to the model. That would be great if I was playing a skirmish level game. But I'm not playing a skirmish level game. We're playing a battalion level game. So I went to the map. Okay, Google Maps. Boop. And I said, okay, well, how big is Hougoumont? You know, or how big could I pretend that it is, right? Okay. Well, this is the Hougoumont compound. And remember, 1.5 inches is 100 yards. So let's just think about this. 200 yards would be 3 inches. 3 inches would be enough to put a building, maybe a very, or maybe even no building, just a town sector. I think 3 inches would be okay. Yeah, so let's look at this. So we're going to use a measuring tool, measure distance, right, to there. And I'm just going to take the frontage of the Hougoumont, right, building, and you're looking at only 50 meters, right? That's only like 3/4 of an inch. So let's take 100 yards. There it is, 100 right there, 100 meters, 101, but that's all right. That is 1.5 inches on the table. 1.5 inches. That's, you know, super duper tiny. You know, if 1.5 is pretty close to 40 millimeters, pretty close. So this would be the size. That's the size of a. Okay, let's bring this in just a little bit. Okay, that's pretty close right there to the size of an infantry base. If I do 30 millimeter bases, that's pretty close. So that one base is bigger than Hougoumont. So, if I had two bases, you're looking at something like this, and then 4 bases, you're looking at something like that. Okay, so that's a 4 base battalion on the table. It's way too big. But if I was to make a town sector that was here and there, maybe up there, if I made that as a town sector and I put a Hougoumont model in there, you could easily put your battalion in there and just say that this is a Hougoumont area. Or I could fudge a little bit and say I could split it in half, maybe do maybe go big this way and go with something just a little bit extra large, you know, fake it till you make it kind of thing. Make one town sector out here with all the buildings in it, and then make a second one over here with just the gardens in it. And then you could occupy it with 2 different battalions. I wanted to do 4. I wanted to do 4 town sectors, the front and back of Hougoumont, and then I wanted to do the gardens. I guess I could get away with 3. I guess I could get away with 3 town sectors. I could make them long, right? I could make, hypothetically, like if I made one like this, let's just say it was a 3x6, right? Let's say I did a 3x6 like that, and then I could do a second one on top, right? And then I could do a 3, whoops, I closed that. I could do a 3x6 out there. So I would have, okay, well, this isn't going to work. Mess that up. But you get the idea. So you have like one town sector here, one town sector there, and then one town sector there. And it would be 3 distinct separate areas in Hougoumont, because Hougoumont actually had different battalions occupying different areas, but on the table it would take up too much space. But luckily this doesn't occupy too much space, and then I could just put woods out in front like you're supposed to have, where the skirmishers are and all that stuff, no problem. So okay, so the problem I have, so I'm talking myself through this for you guys. So if a town sector, I said the Hougoumont main compound should be about 2 inches by 3 inches. And then if I was to include the woods, it winds up only being about 4 inches by 8 inches. I considered doing 2 4-inch squares, one here with the buildings and then one there with the gardens. So I don't know how I might want to do that. I looked over at La Haye Saint, a much smaller compound, right? Wait, is that La Haye Saint? That's not La Haye Saint. There it is. La Haye Saint is a much smaller compound. It's more of a square, um, but there is a walled garden back here that was used as a obstacle, and then there was a. It's actually much larger. There was a orchard out front here, and this also might have been remodeled. This might have been part of the original building. I don't know. So let's measure some distances, right? Okay, so remember 100 yards, which I hit it pretty good right there. That's only 1 inch. No, I'm sorry. That's 1.5 inches from there to there. 1.5 inches. That's the width of like less than one. That's like one base, right? Well, it's a little bit more than one base, which is okay. If I was to not have any physical buildings on there, or if the buildings were removable, but that's not what I want. I want buildings that I'm going to be able to, I want a town sector that I can put down and put bases on it. There is also a concept where you put your building down, whoops, right? You put your building model down on the table, and then you put your bases around the outside of the model, right? So you would have, okay, measure. You would have your 30 millimeter base there, and then you would have another 30 millimeter base there, right? And then you'd have 4 of them. Okay, so you'd have a building on the table, and then you put your battalion around the outside edge of it. Okay, well, I considered that. Okay, so if I consider that, then why don't I just make a town? Okay, let's clear this. Why don't I just make a town sector that includes the building and the area that those bases would have occupied, right? So I could make a town sector like that. Perfect, right? And then I could put the building in the middle and then leave enough room around the outside edge as part of the town sector where these guys could be deployed. Yeah, so that's okay. So okay, so that's not a problem. So far, so good. We've come up with. We can make our town sectors. They would be what? 20 plus 30, that's 50, 60, at least 70 millimeters across. But what I'm thinking is 70 millimeters is about 3 inches, right? So I could do a 3-inch square and maybe squeeze a building into the middle of it. And if I can't, because I'm gonna have to get some 10 millimeter buildings, some just like farms or barns or houses or whatever. They're not going to be very specific. They're just going to be small buildings. And if I can get them to be about 2 by 3, the buildings, then I think I could get a 4-inch square to be the town sector. I'm currently in my 28 millimeters. I was using like 6 by 8, right? So a 4x4 is actually half. Maybe I could go with a 3x4. Yeah, that should work. But yeah, that whole area there. Like, okay, stop. I don't want that. I don't want that. Like that whole area would be a town sector. That would just be called Le Saint. And I might even like have it overlap the road and allow the road to kind of go through the town sector just for looks. I don't know. But when you're in a building, you're supposed to measure from the actual town sector out. So I think I might. But then again, they did have roadblocks and stuff like that in front of Le Saint. So I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do with that. All right, it's just things that are going through my mind. Okay, so now that we've got it figured out, that I'm gonna do like 2x3s or 3x4s or 4x4 town sectors. I'm gonna try to do it in a way where I can have a building permanently attached to the base with a fence or a hedge around the outside edge, and then make like a little diorama instead of just a base with a movable building. I don't really want to do the movable building idea. If I have to, I will, but I don't want to do that. So we'll have to figure that out. Okay, so Hougoumont. The Hougoumont building, I saw I could get a 10 millimeter Hougoumont building. It's 17 inches long. Way too big. I thought about a 6 millimeter building, right? 6 millimeter buildings would be a lot closer to scale, but it's still going to be like 10 inches long, right? And that's still way too big. So I don't even think, maybe if I go down to 3 or 2 millimeter or something, but I don't want little tiny buildings. I want good scale buildings that match the scale of the models. So I'm going to get some 10 millimeter buildings, 10 millimeter walls, make my own little hedges and put some trees in the garden and stuff like that, and make my own little scene. But it's not going to be, it's basically, I'm going to put a town sector down and say that's Hougoumont. Even though it's not going to look like Hougoumont. But that's okay because wargamers are very lenient or very understanding when it comes to that. So that won't be a problem. Okay, so there we go. So Labelle Alliance is probably going to need, okay, I don't know. Can you even see my mouse pointer? There it is. So yeah, Labelle Alliance is going to need a town sector. Hougoumont going to need a couple of town sectors. Le Saint's going to be one town sector. And then when you get to, okay, Papillote over here, there's going to be one on each side, right? So you're looking at 2 farm complexes basically side by side. That should be no problem at all. And then maybe one for fishermen, and then maybe not anything else. But then down here, when you're talking about Plans Noir, we're looking at multiple town sectors because it's supposed to be a city, right? That you're going to have to either maneuver through the city streets or occupy them, right? So is that a town sector or is that multiple town sectors, right? And then maybe that's one, maybe that's one, maybe that's 2, maybe that's 2. I think one of these should be a church, like maybe the bottom one should be the church and maybe the top one should be, I don't know. We could just make it like a cemetery, even though it would just look right. It just, wouldn't be, because I'm only going to have what, like 10 buildings in the town, when really there was probably like 100, so, and then each of these little areas out here might be little town sectors. Now, this is another one of those towns that might need multiple buildings, right? And then this might be one that needs a couple of buildings. And then do I need one at the intersection? I don't know. I'll have to figure all that out. But yeah, those are just going to be like individual buildings on a 3 or 4 inch square representing those town sectors. Now, when it comes to Plans Noir or Hougoumont or La Haye Saint, basically any of these named areas, I think I'm going to shape the bases, give them, just like in specifically, let's flip it over. Specifically for Quatre Bras, right? How this road is not a perfect square. It's kind of like this. So I'm going to have to make like this town sector and this town sector, but not straight. They're going to have, they're going to have to be shaped like this. And then this will be one more, even though it's just a farm, but that's okay. And then these guys down here, this is how I pretty much have it on my 28 millimeter map. I've got like 2 town sectors there. I've got one there. I think I have one there, and I'm not sure about over here, but you notice that there's a couple of bridges right there. And then I might have a couple of town sectors like that. Yeah, and then the woods. Yeah, I'm going to have to make some woods. We're going to have to do the river, and I'm going to have to make a lake. Yeah, and then there's a bridge here and a bridge there. It's going to be fun. I'm going to enjoy it. Because we're playing on Epic, I probably could do another town sector back there. I do want to leave maybe a gap in the town sectors so that troops can move through this area without having to enter and exit a town sector, right? Or just leave enough gap along the top of the map. I think. That should be fun. Yeah, and you notice I have a 1 kilometer scale there, and remember these squares are 800 meters. So this is a 5x9 table. Okay, so basically I'm gonna have to order I'm gonna order some really small. Now I looked at some N scale train buildings. I think I have some out in the garage. I know I do because I use them in my 15 millimeter World War II gaming. I had some N scale model railroading buildings. Going off of memory, those things are pretty small, like maybe an inch by an inch and a half, 2 inches, something like that. So N scale model railroading, like German villas or what do they call it? What do they call that? Like the row houses or whatever. I should be able to use those as well. I'm going to have to make some epic, not hedges. That should be no problem at all. But I'm going to have to make some epic like fencing, and yeah, I've got a lot. I got a lot of work ahead of me. But yeah, that's what I've been thinking about. That's all I wanted to say. I know that took almost an hour, but I've been working on the map, been working on the ground scale, been working on deciding how big my buildings are going to be, how big the town sectors are going to be, and still waiting on the figures to come in. All right. Thanks for coming out and checking out this video, and I'll see you in the next one.